Welcome back to Bookish Dives.
Hey there.
If you're just joining us, well, we've done a couple of these deep explorations before into some really interesting books.
Yeah, always great stuff to dig into.
Definitely. And today, we are diving deep into a book that's, well, it's really got people talking. Dopamine Nation, Finding Balance in the Age of Indulgence by Dr. Anna Lembke.
Right. And it feels so timely, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This book really tackles that constant, that push and pull between pleasure and pain.
Exactly.
Especially now, when we're just surrounded by things designed to give us that immediate hit of reward.
Yeah, it's like we've shifted from maybe scarcity to this total overload of instant gratification. You see it everywhere: food, drugs, news, technology.
Everything.
And that's really what we want to unpack for you today.
Yeah.
We're aiming to pull out the core ideas from Dopamine Nation to help us, and hopefully you, understand all this better and maybe figure out how to find a bit more balance.
And what I think makes Dr. Lembke's approach so compelling is that it's not just abstract theory. She blends the actual neuroscience, how our brains work, with rewards, with real stories of recovery, stories from her patients who are dealing with compulsive overconsumption.
So it's grounded in real experience.
Very much so. It gives this incredibly human angle on these big challenges and, importantly, on the pathways people find towards, well, equilibrium.
Okay, so let's get right into this problem of abundance she talks about.
Yeah.
The book really highlights just how many super rewarding things are constantly fighting for our attention. I mean, it feels like almost everything is engineered now to give us that little dopamine boost.
It does, and our phones.
Oh, the phones, right. She has this really striking phrase for the smartphone, calls it the modern-day hypodermic needle.
Wow.
Delivering digital dopamine 2004/7. It really makes you stop and think.
It really does.
Yeah.
And it perfectly captures the book's central aim, which is to connect that brain science, the reward pathways, with the practical wisdom that comes from recovery.
Finding that balance.
Finding that balance, exactly. How do we navigate this world?
And like you said, it's built on these true stories, her patients' stories. She got their permission, obviously.
Right. And some are quite extreme, admittedly.
Yeah.
But they're powerful because they kind of amplify the struggles many of us feel, maybe on a smaller scale. There's this quote in the book from Kent Dunnington.
Oh, I remember that one.
Yeah, it says, persons with severe addictions are among those contemporary prophets that we ignore to our own demise, for they show us who we truly are.
That hits hard. It suggests we can learn something fundamental about ourselves by looking at these extreme cases.
I think so. They're like, a magnifying glass on the human condition, especially our relationship with desire and instant gratification. The book really focuses on managing this compulsive overconsumption, whether it's, constantly checking your phone or something much more destructive.
Right. And to really show how intense this pursuit of pleasure can get, she shares some really memorable stories. There's one about her own reaction to seeing her supervisor outside the office.
Yeah, that little anecdote about seeing him differently kind of jolted out of the professional context.
It kind of sets the stage, doesn't it? How we compartmentalize people, maybe.
Yeah, and maybe also how our own private pursuits of pleasure can be quite separate, quite hidden sometimes.
Which leads us directly into the story of Jacob and his masturbation machine.
Right. And look, it's an intense example. Dr. Lembke is upfront about that. It might seem completely unrelatable or even bizarre to some.
Definitely catches your attention.
It does. But its power isn't just in the shock value. It's about showing just how incredibly rewarding and how incredibly addictive a self-created pleasure source can become.
He really engineered it, didn't he? Cloth, a coil, a record player for different speeds.
Meticulously.
And using cigarettes to, stay right on the edge for hours.
And that ability to kind of fine-tune the experience, to maintain that pre-orgasmic state, that was the hook. That extreme control combined with the intense sensation made it, for him, the ultimate reward. It became his whole world in a way.
And the book makes it clear he tried to stop, hiding it, taking it apart.
Throwing pieces away, yeah. But that compulsion, that pull, it just kept bringing him back. It's a stark illustration of addiction's power, even in this very unique form.
And while the machine itself is extreme, the pattern is necessarily unique.
Exactly. Lembke uses it as a bridge to more common compulsions. Maybe not building machines, but, that feeling of needing to do something, even when you know it's not great for you long term, that constant urge.
We can probably all relate to that on some level.
I think so. And she even shares her own story, which I thought was really brave.
About the romance novel.
Yeah, her self-described obsession with romance and reading 50 Shades of Grey late at night and realizing, wait, this isn't really how I want to spend my time.
It makes it more relatable, doesn't it? Shows it's a spectrum.
Absolutely. It brings it right back to the idea that compulsive behaviors can take many forms, some seemingly benign, but they become a problem when they start, crowding out other parts of life.
So from all this, the book gives us a working definition of addiction.
Right. Pretty broad, but useful. Essentially, the continued and compulsive consumption of a substance or engagement in a behavior, despite the harm it's causing, harm to yourself, harm to others.
Makes sense. So Jacob's story evolves. He gets married, moves to Germany.
Right. And there he discovers pornography, which becomes a new focus.
And he manages that for a while.
For about a decade, yeah, while working as a scientist. But the book mentions that around 1995, something shifted in his use in Germany, suggesting things were escalating again.
It's often progressive, isn't it? One thing leads to another, the intensity increases.
It seems that way in many cases. And the book then pivots to connect this individual experience to a much larger societal issue, the opioid crisis.
Ah, right. And mentions that public health report.
Yeah, the ASPPH report.
Yeah.
It basically said that the huge increase in the supply of potent prescription opioids directly fueled the rise in dependence and overdose deaths.
So availability is a massive factor.
A huge risk factor. The report even noted that just repeated exposure to opioids can actually cause opioid use disorder in some people. More access equals more problems, basically.
Which ties into this concept the book introduces, limbic capitalism.
Yeah, coined by the historian David Courtwright.
What exactly does that mean?
Well, limbic capitalism basically describes how our modern economy increasingly targets the primitive, reward-seeking part of our brain, the limbic system.
Okay.
It uses technology, marketing, everything to make rewards incredibly accessible, super potent, and constantly varied. It's capitalism aimed right at our basic drives.
And the example used is the cigarette rolling machine from the 1880s.
That's a killer example.
Going from 4 cigarettes a minute manually to 20,000 a minute with the machine.
It's staggering. And the result, billions smoked daily, millions of deaths. It just starkly illustrates how technology amplifying access and efficiency for these rewarding substances can have devastating public health consequences.
Absolutely devastating. So bringing it back to Jacob and fast forwarding a bit, he remarries, moves to Seattle, and the internet opens up a whole new world for his compulsions.
Right. The anonymity, the accessibility, it was like pouring gasoline on the fire. He went back to porn, compulsive masturbation, and then discovered online chat rooms.
And it wasn't just passive consumption anymore, was it?
No, he became an active creator, building his own 10NS unit. That's a device that uses electrical currents specifically for sexual pleasure.
Wow.
And creating routines for it, downloading routines, sharing them online, participating in live chats. It became this whole interactive online ecosystem fueling his addiction.
It shows how the internet doesn't just provide access, it can actually suggest entirely new compulsive behaviors.
Exactly. The sharing aspect, the community, even a distorted one, adds another layer of reinforcements.
And the book shares that really disturbing story from Detective Vince Dutto.
Oh, yeah, the case with the young boy.
Exposed to awful content online, which then led to him acting out harmfully with his younger brother.
It's chilling. A really stark example of how easily harmful ideas and compulsions can spread online, especially to vulnerable people, like a contagion.
And Lembke explicitly calls viral videos and memes contagious.
She does. They spread rapidly, influence behavior on a huge scale. The whole system is designed for engagement and sharing, which makes it perfect for spreading behaviors, good or bad.
And for Jacob, the consequence was his wife finding out about his online activities.
And she left him, which just underscores the profound real-world damage these compulsions can inflict on relationships, on trust, on everything.
Such a heavy cost.
It really is. It highlights that isolation that often comes with deep addiction.
The book then zooms out again, looking at societal factors, who's most vulnerable.
Yeah, it makes a really important point about the poor and undereducated in wealthy nations.
That's so cool.
Well, the argument is that when you have this easy access to hyper-rewarding drugs and behaviors, but you lack access to things like meaningful work, safe housing, good education, healthcare, equality.
It's a perfect storm.
Exactly. People might turn to those easily available highs as a coping mechanism, as a substitute for a life that feels empty or hopeless.
It connects this to the work of Anne Case and Angus Deaton, the Princeton economists.
Right. Their research on deaths of despair.
That term is so evocative.
It is. They found rising death rates among middle-aged white Americans without a college degree, driven by drug overdoses, alcohol-related liver disease, and suicide.
It paints a really grim picture of the social determinants of addiction.
It really does. It shows how deeply intertwined social and economic factors are with individual vulnerability to compulsive overconsumption. Lack of hope is a powerful driver.
But the book doesn't just stay in the negative. It explores the flip side, this idea of pursuing pain or maybe discomfort to find balance.
Yeah, which sounds counterintuitive at first, right?
A little bit. It introduces Michael, this guy who uses cold showers and ice baths.
And he describes feeling high afterwards. It's fascinating. He's intentionally seeking out discomfort to achieve a sense of well-being.
It makes you think. Cold baths used to be just normal, not a therapy, just how you washed.
Exactly. And the book notes the ancient Greeks advocated cold water therapy. It's not a new idea.
But now there's some science behind it.
Yes, there's a study mentioned from Charles University in Prague. They measured neurotransmitter levels after cold water immersion.
And the results were pretty dramatic.
Unbelievably so. Dopamine increased by 250%.
Wow.
And norepinephrine, which is linked to alertness and focus, went up by 530%.
That's huge. Why isn't everyone doing this?
Good question. But it shows a powerful, natural way our bodies respond. The book explains it using the idea of homeostasis keeping balance.
Like a seesaw.
Kind of. The initial shock of the cold is the pain side. The body then overcompensates to restore balance, flooding the system with these feel-good chemicals, pushing the seesaw over to the pleasure side. Dr. Lembke uses this image of gremlins hopping from the pain side to the pleasure side after the initial stressor is removed.
Okay, that makes sense. It also mentions hormesis.
Right? Hormesis is the idea that small doses of something stressful or noxious can actually trigger beneficial responses, making us stronger or more resilient, like exercise stressing muscles to make them grow.
Or a vaccine using a weakened virus.
Exactly. A little bit of the bad thing can actually be good in the right dose. And the book suggests our modern, comfortable, sedentary lives might actually be fueling addiction because we lack these natural stressors.
We're not getting those hormetic challenges built into daily life anymore.
Pretty much, which makes things like deliberate cold exposure or exercise potentially more important.
And exercise comes up a lot, doesn't it? The benefits for mood, anxiety, thinking.
Oh yeah, better cognition, more energy, better sleep. Exercise is presented as this fundamental, healthy way to engage our reward system and maintain that internal balance.
So, okay, understanding the problem is one thing. What about solutions? The book really hammers home the importance of honesty.
Radical honesty, yeah.
Okay.
It's presented as absolutely essential, not just for formal recovery, but for anyone wanting a more balanced life.
How does honesty help, according to the book?
Well, first, it promotes self-awareness. If you commit to telling the truth, even just to yourself initially, you have to actually look at what you're doing.
You can't hide from it as easily.
Exactly. You confront your actions and their consequences. Second, the book argues it's crucial for building real, intimate human connections.
Which feels a bit paradoxical. You'd think hiding flaws would be better for connection.
Right. But Lembke argues the opposite. Vulnerability, the kind that comes with honesty, is what actually builds trust and empathy. It draws people closer.
Okay.
Third, it helps create what she calls a truthful autobiography. Being honest about your past and present helps you be accountable and live more authentically.
And there's this idea that honesty is contagious.
Yeah, intriguing, right? The suggestion is that when we're honest, it creates a safer space for others to be honest too. It models the behavior and might even help prevent future addiction by fostering open communication.
She mentions the Odysseus myth. The slaying was in the telling.
Right? Suggesting the act of articulating our story, our truth, is itself transformative and healing.
Is there any science behind honesty being beneficial?
The book briefly touches on research about stimulating the prefrontal cortex, the brain's decision-making hub, and finding that it can increase honest behavior.
Interesting. So our brains might be wired for truth-telling to some extent?
It suggests there are mechanisms supporting it, yeah. And maybe practicing honesty strengthens those pathways.
Dr. Lembke shares that personal story again about her reading habit.
Telling your student about it, yeah. And how just verbalizing it brought clarity and led to a change. It shows the power of simply speaking the truth out loud.
And then Jacob's story comes back. He tells his wife he used the machine again.
And her reaction is unexpected. Instead of anger, it's empathy, appreciation for his honesty.
Wow, that's powerful.
It really illustrates how honesty, even when difficult, can deepen intimacy rather than destroy it. The book connects this to oxytocin, the bonding hormone, which is released during these moments of connection, and can actually enhance dopamine release in reward pathways. Healthy connection feels good.
It's the complete opposite of compulsive consumption, which usually leads to more isolation.
Exactly. When the substance or behavior becomes the primary relationship, human connection suffers. There's even that experiment mentioned with rats on heroin.
Oh, yeah.
They lost interest in helping other rats in distress. Addiction can override even basic social instincts.
Okay, the final major theme is shame. This seems like a tricky one.
Very tricky. The book makes a crucial distinction. Destructive shame versus pro-social shame.
What's the difference?
It's all about the response of others. Shame itself, that feeling of having done wrong, isn't inherently bad. But if people react with condemnation, judgment, rejection...
That's destructive shame.
Right. It makes you feel worthless, isolated, and often drives you deeper into the very behavior you're ashamed of. It's a vicious cycle.
But pro-social shame.
That happens in a supportive context, where you can admit wrongdoing, take responsibility, but you're met with understanding, empathy, acceptance. It lessens the negative feeling and motivates change within a community.
The book uses Lori's story in her church as an example of destructive shame.
Yeah, she tried to be honest about her struggles, but the community didn't really know how to respond, lacked understanding, and she ended up feeling more isolated and ashamed.
Even with good intentions, communities can get it wrong.
Sadly, yes. And this is contrasted sharply with the model of Alcoholics Anonymous,
which facilitates pro-social shame.
Exactly. AA is presented as having this built-in de-shaming process. Sharing stories, the common ground, the lack of judgment for the addiction itself, though accountability for actions is key. It creates safety.
Todd's experience is mentioned, specifically Step 10.
Right. The ongoing personal inventory and admitting wrongs. It's about continued honesty and accountability within that supportive group structure.
So the group norms and the shared goal kind of leverage shame in a positive way. Like, you don't want to let the group down by relapsing and not being honest.
Precisely. Admitting a relapse might involve temporary shame, but it's met with support, not condemnation. It reinforces the group's purpose and uses that social pressure constructively. The book mentions Ian Cohen's theory of sacrifice and stigma.
How does that fit in?
It's an economic theory applied to groups like AA, suggesting that the cost of participation, like the potential stigma or the requirement for honesty, helps screen out free riders and ensures commitment, strengthening the group's effectiveness, the club good of shared sobriety.
We hear about Jacob getting deeply involved in Sexaholics Anonymous, too.
Yes, finding that same kind of supportive, structured community was key for him.
And Lori eventually finds recovery through AA as well.
Yeah, her story turns around when she finds that acceptance, belonging, and shared narrative in AA. It really highlights the power of community and vulnerability.
And Dr. Lembke even brings it home with a story about her kids and stealing chocolate.
Yeah. Being honest with them about a minor transgression and how it reinforced their family culture of honesty and forgiveness.
It shows it applies on all scales.
Absolutely. Mutual honesty fosters intimacy, builds trust, and, the book concludes, releases that healthy endogenous dopamine through genuine connection. So much better than the fleeting artificial highs.
Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive into Dopamine Nation. The big message seems to be that finding balance in this crazy dopamine-saturated world isn't about total self-denial.
No, not at all. It's more about understanding this delicate dance, this seesaw between pleasure and pain.
And taking active steps, like self-binding, setting limits for ourselves.
Right. And maybe intentionally seeking out healthy discomforts like exercise or cold showers or just challenging ourselves.
And above all, embracing that radical honesty.
Absolutely. Being truthful with ourselves and others, it seems to be the foundation. It's about awareness of how our own brains work, questioning that constant chase for pleasure, avoiding all discomfort, and realizing just how powerful truth and real human connection are for genuine well-being.
Definitely a lot to think about there. Some really powerful insights from Dr. Lembke.
For sure.
We really hope this discussion gives you, our listeners, some food for thought on how these ideas might play out in your own life.
Yeah. How do you find your balance?
And if you enjoyed this exploration, please do follow Bookish Dives. We'll be back with more deep dives into fascinating books and the big ideas they contain.